There's a lot of bad behavior on the internet, and it's very difficult to police. The rise of generative AI takes this to a whole new level. Hey everybody, this is Chris Brandt here with another FUTR podcast. Today we're talking with Josh Buxbaum, co-founder of WebPurify, a content moderation platform. Josh is going to tell us about how they are trying to keep us all safe from the dangerous people on the internet. And he's going to make it very clear, if you are not policing the content on your site, you are definitely going to change your thinking by the time we are done here. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on. Like I said, I know we talked earlier, and this is you opened my eyes to a lot of areas that are potentially more problematic than I had thought of, and there's just a lot of bad actors out there. Can you speak a little bit to why is it so important to have content moderation on your sites and your assets and things like that?
Just to sort of set the stage, we've been in the content moderation space for 17 plus years. So we've really watched as this type of content has become more and more of an issue, right? When we first started, it was sort of text was a big issue. Think, AOL chat rooms. And I mean, not to date myself, but
how quaint that was.
What a lovely time. And so we've seen this content just steamroll as we were dealing with text and then images and then videos.
We're in an era where there's just tremendous challenges on policing content and things like that. But what motivates you? Why? I know you have in mind a much bigger and broader mission that you're bringing to this. Could you talk a little bit about what motivates you?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I don't think anybody could do what we do unless there was a driving force other than having a successful business, right, or monetary gain.
Right.
It's a very challenging industry to be in. We look at some really awful stuff. We deal with some really terrible people. We're consistently exposed to it, and so you have to have something driving you. And for me, it's keeping users safe online. I mean, I've got a son, a niece and nephew. And for me, I particularly the longer I do this, the more I realize how dangerous it is out there. And so, look, it's impossible for me to even make a dent, or I should say for us to make a dent. Now, we have a very large team moderating 24/7, a human team. We've got a significant amount of artificial intelligence. We're moderating millions and millions of images and video hours and so on. But still, the amount of content that's out there to police and to moderate is insurmountable, right?
Right.
But my passion lies in keeping users safe and doing our best to put a dent in the problem and protect these communities and keep them safe.
Well, and I know that you've actually had some success at that. I know, there's, I don't want to say words that are going to make the YouTube algorithm freak out, but you're protecting children out there as well. And, some of the stuff that you've done has actually led to a substantial amount of arrests as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So in 2022 alone, we were responsible for the arrest of over 500 bad actors. I don't know the wording that's appropriate here, but
I don't know either.
I think we would call them
predators. Is a good one.
Predators. Yeah. Sure. And absolutely, that's a huge win for us. It's one thing to take down an inappropriate bikini picture on a dating site, right? It's another thing to and to be honest, it's a great example. The verticals that we operate in are endless, right? So the need to moderate goes from catching this really, really bad illegal type content to moderating profiles on dating sites, to e-com platforms where users are submitting feedback or reviews. It's really endless, the amount of content that's out there and the use cases.
And the thing is, too, this stuff spreads like crazy. I know you told me about, this Times Square experiment that you guys did. You want to talk about that real quick?
Being a moderator, we recognize the challenges of being a live moderator, and we can discuss later sort of the mental health programs we have in place and sort of the challenges that they face every day. They truly are heroes of the internet. And what we try to do is sometimes you can sort of get tunnel vision when you're doing your job. And I've been a moderator myself. As part of being in this business, you have to know every aspect of the job. And so I've sat
Sure.
at a desk and moderated hundreds of thousands of pieces of content over my career in the space. And what we wanted to do was drive home that you're not just sitting here clicking buttons on a computer. And it's very hard to convey that when an image shows up and you select a label and go to another and you do 10,000 at a time. And so we were
Right.
working on a project where images were displaying in Times Square on one of the large screens. And it was a big project. And we thought this was such a great opportunity to drive home the impact that our moderators are having, because we're always trying to remind our team of how powerful their job is. And like I said, that can easily be forgotten. And so what we
Right.
did is we had someone filming Times Square on the big screen, and an image would populate in our tool in our office, and a moderator would see that image. He would then act on it and then see it show up, on the big screen in Times Square. And I can't think of a better way to drive home the impact of what we do.
Right.
And Chris, the most interesting part is, so that was showing to a few thousand people in Times Square. That is nothing compared to an image, that goes to a social site that could be shared millions and millions of times within, hours.
Right.
So we always are really doing our best to, one, drive home the impact of what we do, and two, celebrate the wins like arrests and things. Because what we do is super important, and it isn't just sitting clicking buttons, but it can certainly feel like that sometimes.
Well, and I think it's quite frankly one of the hardest things to get right on the internet. And without it, it just makes sites unusable, quite frankly.
Yeah, and drawing that line, those community guidelines are extremely challenging. Drawing that line between something that's truly offensive and that's acceptable is sometimes fairly gray.
Right.
And the risk for brands is they can alienate their users if they're too strict.
Yes.
And if they're not strict enough, they're going to alienate their users because they're not comfortable with the experience they're having. And that line is constantly evolving and moving with new challenges, new social topics or concerns or positions that a brand may be taking. It's always evolving, and it's always challenging to find that line.
We're in a point right now where there's a big paradigm shift in technology with generative AI, and I know that's a big potential market for you and big potential problem for all of us, right? I mean, can you speak to how generative AI is impacting your business?
Gen AI is so new, and it's already having a significant impact, right? It's fresh,
Right.
if you will. So the first thing is the ability to create content. So as I said, content, there's a significant amount. It's always growing. People are always coming up with new and creative ways to submit offensive content, or even harmless content, but there's always new content. All of a sudden now with generative AI, the ability to create content has been accelerated. And so I can create 30 art pieces, some sort of digital art in 5 minutes. All I do is provide a prompt and it's there. So the amount of content is exponentially growing. And so we're seeing that on our platforms. And then, of course, the challenge with generative AI is folks can use it to intentionally create content that would bypass artificial intelligence, basically use AI to trick AI.
To beat
right?
AI, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
And then determining what is AI generated is a whole other challenge. And the real concern there is, I mean, of course, the challenge of whether someone's interacting with a human or an AI is significant, particularly when you're looking for advice on real life problems, right? And trusting that another human cares when you're really talking to a computer. But there's the other risk with generative AI is that the content is the folks who created Gen AI don't necessarily know what it's capable of. They literally have hired folks that called prompt engineers, and their job is solely to feed questions in to see what the AI will send out. That's pretty concerning, to build something and not even know what it's capable of.
If you look at some of the different generative AI models, when you connect them to the internet, they get really squirrely really fast. I know Microsoft was building one way back, and every time they put it on, it turned racist, like a horrible racist, violent, thing within about 24 hours or less. Bard, you only get so many prompts before, things start getting squirrely, and, integrating OpenAI into Microsoft's chat into Bing, you can't do too many in a row, otherwise it starts going off the rails. So it's complicated.
The other big challenge is that we have this thing called UGC, user-generated content, allowing people to create authentic content, whether
like we're doing right now.
Exactly. And we're having an honest conversation where we're really sharing our opinions and we're both human beings.
Right.
Authenticity is jeopardized. So users in the old days, you'd look at a picture of what a product looks like because the advertiser showed the person in that cool t-shirt, whatever it may be. Now you look at the reviews, you look at real people who've purchased it, you look at their user-generated content with them in the shirt. It fits too tight, it's darker than was in the picture, whatever it may be. We trust user opinions, right? We trust user-generated content. Well, now that is all at risk. Because if I can't tell what's user-generated or AI-generated, the whole benefit of user-generated content and the authenticity piece is at risk. And so what I see to be the biggest challenge is, like I said earlier, determining whether someone wrote this review or the AI wrote this review. Because now, if I can't trust the authenticity, it threatens UGC in general.
Tell me a little bit about, how does WebPurify work? You have a lot of people on the back end, obviously, because this is so complicated that you really do need some sort of human moderation and human intervention at times. But you also have AI working here, and you have you've got businesses that have different requirements. There's a lot that has to go into this. Tell me a little bit about how it all works.
There's a lot of moving pieces for sure. We consider what we do to be moderation as a service. So essentially, you can easily integrate with our platform or our tools. And what that means is we're called an API, which means you integrate with our services. You relay content to us. It populates in our tool. We moderate it, right? We make a decision and then send a response back to you. So we've sort of created a way to easily have moderators, live teams looking at all of your content. And our tool is highly evolved over the last 17 years to give our moderators the tools they need to moderate quickly but efficiently, whether that be the AI scores populating for them so they know what the AI thinks a piece of content qualifies as, whether that be mental health risks, like if there is potentially upsetting content, showing in grayscale, right? So it's not as impactful. We use a combination of AI and humans to accomplish our goals.
You're obviously moderation as a service, so you are providing an API that people can interact with from their site to send you content for moderation. Does that then, do you just like sort of tag things as needing to be removed? What are the workflow options? Can you do like inline moderation so that it comes to you before it gets put onto the page? Or is it like after the fact that gets removed? Or how does that all work?
Yeah, so that's really client dependent. So what you're referring to is pre-moderation, ensuring that the content gets checked even before it goes live.
Gotcha.
Some clients elect to do that. Other clients let it populate and we look at it after. So that flow is really up to the client.
When it gets to you, the data gets tagged and then it goes back, and then they have to build in the systems to remove that? Or do you have people who can actually physically go into those sites and remove that content? How does that work?
No, typically the response that we send to them, they'll take action based on that. So we're not necessarily, now some clients do have us integrate and use their tools, but typically we send a response and then they action on it appropriately, mainly because we're not the voice of the brand. We simply let them know what we found, and then they decide how to inform the user, whether that user is banned, whether they're simply warned, right? But essentially, our approach has always been a combination of artificial intelligence and humans. Because as you know, the AI can struggle with context.
Right.
And the AI will never replace the human piece, but it certainly helps us scale. And so a lot of times AI will review content first, our services will. And then depending on scores, it'll either be thrown out immediately or escalate to humans. And so when we do this, it's really a client's tolerance for risk. If they're going to solely rely on AI, that's super risky, but that there may be a budget decision there. But typically, at scale, we're using both to accomplish our mission.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, since you've got this kind of platform like this, I mean, could you even just police brand guidelines? Like employees posting things that, like make sure that they're posting it appropriately for the brand's specifications.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? So we're always finding new needs, right? So we always approach it as, hey, we're protecting brands from the users, right?
Right.
And now, with this new gig economy, for example, there are a lot of folks who are working for shopping apps or driving apps or whatever it may be. And so those folks on their last day may decide to say something to the last ride that they had,
right.
Or when they're shopping in the supermarket, take an inappropriate picture and say, hey, is this something you wanted? Right. And so, there's this world where we're not just worried about users submitting to sites. We're now protecting companies either from their own employees or from contractors or whatever it may be. But there's always these like new use cases surfacing that I wish I could say I was a genius when we began this and saw them coming. But it's an endless amount of challenges that the internet's presenting, right? And like I said, with the Metaverse presents its own challenges. Generative AI,
right.
soon after, presents its own challenges. And I'm always just thinking, what's next? And so that's our specialty, is to really adapt quickly to these new technologies. And I think the first step in doing that is not pretending like you know the answer. There's a lot of quick tech that comes out that says, hey, we can detect generative AI content. No problem. You can't.
Good luck with that.
You simply can't, right? Yeah. But so we're not ones to just jump on a platform and say we can do this. What we do is say we've been doing this for 17 plus years, and we can approach this with the tools we've learned and recognize what we can't do and what we can, and we will evolve the way we address it, which is how we've always tackled every problem since we began. And it's really a partnership with our clients to do that.
It does seem like there's a potential for a tremendous amount of customization. So, you mentioned the fact that you've been at it for 17 years. And I know WebPurify back in the day was just sort of filtering, data coming into a company for the most part, right? But that business has changed drastically since then. Could you talk about some of the lessons that you learned about all this, and like things that maybe weren't intuitive initially, but you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a big part of this?
We were strictly doing text moderation,
right?
And that was really the most common type of user generated content. And as I said, that evolved to new types of content. I think the thing that we underestimated was how complicated each community's guidelines can get.
Right.
And it's fascinating how what you would think is something that's as simple as no nudity, violence, drugs, hate. It's just not that simple.
No, it isn't.
And so I call it sharing a brain. What we do with our clients is over time, because we don't share our moderation teams across projects for this very reason. We have dedicated teams 24/7 that work on one specific workflow, and they know it inside and out. And they don't right out of the gate. There's a learning curve, but you have to know the community, and it's highly detailed in terms of what you're moderating. And so, we'll have new clients come to us and say things like, well, here are our rules, right? And it'll say something like nothing dangerous, right? And
What's dangerous?
That gives me a headache.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so part of our job as consultants is to then delve into their rules and help create something that's trainable and replicable. So if I were to train moderators and say, nothing dangerous, it means nothing,
yeah.
right? Is someone standing on a cliff dangerous? Is someone closing their eyes while driving? Whatever it may be. Me on a bicycle is probably dangerous.
Yeah. You're
right?
not wearing a helmet.
So. Yeah, right, exactly. And plus, I have a poor sense of balance, but you would never know that in the image, right? And so, so we had to translate that to, imminent death, right? Likely death, right? And so we literally need to interpret these guidelines, and they're constantly evolving. And we're constantly. I'll give you a perfect example of how quickly we need to react.
Yeah.
During the Black Lives Matter movement, there were folks were leaving their screens blank. They were strictly black screens,
right?
And it was a movement to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, We happen to have a rule generally for our clients is if there's a blank submission, we reject it as blank or broken. The reason we do that is because images can populate later.
Right.
So we can't risk that this was just some sort of a technical issue and 5 minutes later something populates on the site.
Oh, man.
We're rejecting these images completely unintentionally, right? Obviously, we weren't taking a position at all. But we had to very quickly change that rule when we got emails and complaints from clients saying our users are complaining, they can't express themselves, they're being shut down. Right. And so we have to be very nimble because there's always some sort of a new challenge or nuance. So immediately that rule was out the window, right?
Right.
And so we're constantly adapting, not only to things like that, but there's just new threats, right? Sadly, there'll be something that got live streamed, and now that's going to be showing on all the platforms we moderate. So we have a team that literally responds. They're on essentially we use something called pager duty, but they're paged, and then we put together training immediately. So within 5 to 10 minutes of the incident, our moderators are already ready to see it in the platforms they're monitoring. Yeah. So it's very dynamic and it's very active what we do, and it is 24/7.
You mentioned that there's certain things that might start circulating that become a meme, and then they start circulating the internet. And the ability to identify those early would give you an advantage on trying to clean that the content up. Because I would imagine too, the sooner you get at dealing with that content, the less it propagates, and you have to deal with it more, right?
Exactly. You have to nip it in the bud, and and yes, the more it spreads, the more evil it gets. And what I mean by evil is the more it's out there, and you'll see it forever. Part of our responsibility of being in the industry is not to keep secrets and say, that's what's unique about the moderation space is we all work together. This isn't the kind of thing like, hey, we figured out there's this really bad meme going around. We're going to just keep it and just tell our clients. Right. There's a community, right? Yeah. We all work for the greater good. So we're the first to blast out to our clients particularly, but also other folks in the space and say, hey, there's this thing going around, right? We think it's pretty nefarious, and we wanted to make you aware of it. But then we also alert our clients if something surfaces on a particular platform. Hey, we want to adapt. Will you be okay with us rejecting this type of content because it will be showing up in the next 5 hours, right, or 3 hours, or whatever it may be.
Wow. Well, and I think that speaks to why this is so hard to do yourself. I mean, a company with 17 years of experience doing this is going to have a lot of insights on just, like all those things, that the nuances to moderating content. Just from the things we just talked about, it just seems like that would be really easy to miss stuff. And I remember Facebook had a big problem because, somebody's, nudity is, somebody else's breastfeeding, and that, that gets into a whole lot of, difficult gray areas that are really hard to address.
Yeah, that's the constant challenge of what we do. And we even developed an experience where you can go on and moderate, images. You can put yourself in the seat of a moderator. And what you do is you sit down and you have to identify which is weaponry, the presence of weapons, dangerous driving, and 2 or 3 other categories. And you moderate. And then you fail miserably. And then you're given the real details. Reckless driving means only one hand on the wheel. It's only for vehicles. Must have eyes must not be on the road. And then all of a sudden you succeed because it's you delve into the minutia of the criteria. It's a very significant portion of what we do is the consultative piece. So it's not just you tell us what to do and we're going to keep an eye on it. We're constantly having check-in calls with our clients, identifying new problems, talking about trends in the community. They're sharing with us pushback they're getting from the community. We're recommending adjustments. And so we're always building this knowledge library that we can share with our clients, and we're always getting smarter. I mean, recently we brought onto our team the former head of trust and safety operations at Twitter, Alexandra Popkin, to bring her perspective and knowledge, right? So we're amassing this knowledge over 17 years and bringing in different perspectives so that we can add that value, because it's one thing to be able to moderate. It's another thing to understand this industry, understand communities, understand the challenges, and how we can really drill down into these guidelines in an effective way.
One of the things that we've heard a lot about is how difficult a job it is to be a live moderator, right? And I know that there's no getting around it. You're going to be exposed to some really difficult things. But could you
Right.
talk to how you manage, to the mental health side of this, and how you take care of your employees so that they can, go home at the end of the day and, have a normal
Right.
life?
Yeah, and it's a very valid question, and I think unfortunately the moderation industry has been shown in some pretty negative lights, and that may be just because that's the more interesting story.
Sure.
And I certainly don't mean to downplay how impactful it can be, because I'm sure there's some really rough stories out there, and I
Yeah.
myself am aware of how difficult moderating can be. But you very rarely hear about, like I was discussing earlier, the wins, right? The
Right.
pride that the moderators take in their work. So yeah, we approach this a few different ways. So we have a very advanced mental health program for all moderators, whether that be 24-hour counseling available, mindfulness sessions. We really build this family environment. So the office environment is really important. We've got our pool table and our foosball table and our library and our chill out
That's very
area.
.com.
And it's yeah, I know, isn't it? But some of those .coms don't necessarily need all of those
No,
spaces,
you're
right?
actually
We
a
actually
company
need
that
them.
needs it.
Right. Right. We need people to be able to relax,
Yeah.
right? And so we utilize all that stuff and really encourage breaks, and actually have mandatory breaks, because you have to take care of yourself,
Yeah.
right? Our priority is to take care of our moderators first, so we can efficiently take care of the communities that we protect. But right, because we're 24/7, we are a family and we support each other. We celebrate birthdays and holidays in the office together. So there's this real sense of team building. We've got sports teams that compete with each other, the video moderators versus the image moderators, right? So there's a significant amount of support, both mental health wise and just sitting, the guy sitting next to you, right? And we encourage, it's so dark what we do sometimes. We encourage a sense of humor. We encourage them to talk about what they've seen, right?
Sure.
But quite honestly, the moderators overall recognize this, and I think it was more difficult earlier because it wasn't necessarily seen as a career. This used to
Right.
be seen as a temporary job. You do your thing, you go home because you couldn't figure anything else out temporarily, right?
Right.
Now there's a true career path, right? So our moderators aren't there to just sit and moderate. They recognize that they're going to learn community guidelines. They're going to learn these processes. Eventually they can, and most of our trainers, most of our quality control team, most of our managers are moderators who graduated.
Wow.
So there's now a career path. They could leave us and go be the head of trust and safety at any organization after working with us for 5 or 10 years, right?
Right.
So it's a little different because they recognize the impact they're having. And like I said, by celebrating the wins, they're empowered. It's not nearly as upsetting as one may think, but certainly we don't underestimate how impactful it is.
I don't think one could underestimate the impact that those wins could have on somebody, because it's very different from, like looking at all the worst things on the internet that it can throw at you and just being like, there's nothing I can do against this barrage of badness, to like, hey, I'm actually saving people's lives. I'm really helping people. I'm protecting children. I'm, there's a lot of really amazing stuff in here that you can, hang your hat on.
Yeah, one angle we take, for example, is we do a significant amount of moderation in the metaverse. And unfortunately, women in gaming tend to be targets. And so our moderators in VR are primarily women. And what they are is they're sort of out there and they're going to be abused in some way. And the training is very interesting. They are actually quite happy when someone acts towards them a certain way because they're trained in it.
Because they can do something about it.
Number two,
yeah.
Right. And it's almost like being an undercover police officer. You're like, gotcha. Right.
Gotcha.
Like you just messed with the wrong person. Right. And so they're armed with that power because essentially they're representing the game. And so they're not victims. They feel like, wow, I'm glad this happened to me. Guess what, buddy? You're about to get kicked off and reported and all these actions will be taken against you. So you sort of spin the narrative in perspective. And if anything, when they go home on that day, they're glad that they encountered those bad folks versus just a regular day of being in game because they didn't have the impact they were hoping to have that day.
That's awesome too, because I'll tell you, man, gaming culture can be extraordinarily toxic, especially for women. Yep. And I got to imagine, some people who have been subjected to that would love to have a way to, right that wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's certainly, and that's what we're going into the game having that power, right? So it feels really good. And of course, within the metaverse, you have that heightened sense of reality. So as you said, traditionally games are toxic. Now add this extra element of it feeling real and interacting. And so you have new
Yeah.
challenges there.
Within a week, Meta had assault allegations in their game.
It's a challenging environment, but it's also, I mean, it's also like the most incredible technology I've ever experienced. Like it's such a leap. So it's like everything else. It's amazing. It's brilliant. It's fascinating. It's engaging, but it comes with moderation challenges. And so, we love the metaverse. We love being in it and keeping it safe. But we recognize that how important it is to police these users, and so we're doing that. But I happen to be like an addicted. I've got my Oculus headset, and that's how I blow off steam, right? I love to game.
My son is big in VR gaming. He's a
Oh,
Valve
wow.
Index guy. He's got all the stuff on the walls, and
That's awesome.
he's got every. He's slowly collecting every headset, I think. And this new Apple VR headset is melting his brain at the moment.
Well, that's going to be an expensive one, Chris. You may want to keep him away from that for a while.
$3,500.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're going to have to start saving up, my friend.
Yeah.
So, like, what's next for WebPurify? Where you guys go from here?
I mean, we're constantly adapting to the new challenges. So as we said earlier, Gen AI is a place that we're putting a lot of focus in. And we're always the mental health piece also. We're always evolving our tool to help keep our moderators safe. So one thing that we've been adapting is when videos come in that are potentially offensive or upsetting, there's really no need for a moderator to have to watch that video with the audio, right? So what you can do is storyboard that video, which essentially just take screen grabs from every 2 seconds or something. And essentially you can scan it real quick, see what's going on. And you didn't have the real experience of watching the video. And so we've talked with trauma therapists who have drawn a very clear line in the sand between looking at images versus watching a video, and the impact is vastly different. It's significantly more impactful when you watch a video and it seems real. Images, you can actually convince yourself that it's not real, that it's a movie, or that it's screenshots from whatever it may be. So that storyboarding is a really important feature, and that's something that is in our tool, but we're evolving it a bit more. And again, working with the AI to determine what frames should show and so on.
I know you also mentioned that, like, you also do show things in black and white too, which also lessens the trauma too, which I think is interesting as well.
Absolutely. So there's blurring tools. There's black and white is definitely, again, having sat in the moderator seat and looking at both versions of images while we were testing it. Really takes the sting out of certain types of content when you take the color out. It just seems a lot less real.
That sounds amazing. So, like, if somebody wanted to try out WebPurify, or if they wanted to try to become a moderator, where should they go?
I mean, they can certainly email us. They can go to our website. If you're interested in using our services, you can go to our website, sign up for a free trial, and easily integrate. One of the benefits, Chris, of what we offer is we do offer turnkey services. So we do have a team that moderates for not safe for work, nudity, violence, drugs, hate, 24 hours a day. It's just not specific to your brand. They're just simply looking at those images. So that's one tool for low budget clients who, we think it's important to let everybody have access to moderation. So we have this shared team that moderates for that criteria alone. So you can simply go to our website, you can sign up for a free trial. You can email support@webpurify.com if you have any questions. You can email sales@webpurify.com. We're here. We're always looking for new challenges and ways to help keep communities safe, because it's certainly rough out there.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, hey, thanks for doing what you do. I value content moderation. I'll say, like, even with this YouTube channel, like, when we have female guests on, you get just horrible comments, just like right out of the gate. And it's mind blowing to me that people spend the time doing that kind of nonsense. So I appreciate your moderation efforts.
Thanks. I mean, it's so bad that we did I shouldn't say it's so bad, but we did a survey of the content. We pulled data from all of our moderation stats last year, and that's across all different platforms, e-com, dating, e-learning sites, and so on.
Right.
And we came to the conclusion of that data that 1 in 27 user submitted images was not safe for work. And that's across all different platforms, right? That's fascinating,
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't drive home the need for moderation, I don't know what does. Um, so yeah, we're necessary, but we're always trying to figure out a way to keep that balance with users happy and platforms safe.
And that 1 in 27 number is really scary considering we're like uploading like 1 billion photos a minute at this point.
Right.
It's just
Yeah. It's a scary
crazy.
stat.
It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it is.
Again, thanks so much for keeping us safe out there. We appreciate the work you do. And thanks so much for coming on. It was really great to hear your story and talk with you. Appreciate it.
Chris, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Give us a like. Think about subscribing. And I will see you in the next one.